What's up, guys? The fire is warm, so gather around, find a seat, and get ready, because we're going to tell some stories. This is the Cosmic Campfire. So, it's been a pretty good week since we last spoke. The kids are doing great with school. Virtual education is getting better and better every day. They know how to get around, they know where they're supposed to be. Even my 8-year old is pretty adjusted to like telling time and being on schedule. She knows when she needs to be where. My 12-year old, he's doing a great job of taking care of his own schedule and making sure that he's taking care of his assignments on time. The only one that still needs a lot of assistance is the kindergartner, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that she can't read. So and she can't tell time. So for her to like get around on her own is a problem. But fortunately, I'm around when they need help, and anytime that she needs to be somewhere, I can get her there. The other two being more independent does provide me with more time to work with her. So all in all, it's been a great week at the house. It's been great for the kids. School's been going well. My wife interviewed for a new job, so she might have a new full time job starting next week. So that'll change things around a little bit for us as well. And other than that, I've just been working on everything that I've been doing and reading a lot of comic books. There's been a lot of good stuff out there. I've been trying to read through my free comic book day pile because I did pick up quite a few free books last week. And I don't know. This year, it seems like some of the books are really good and other books are not so great. I've been doing the 2000 AD column for Multiversity Comics, and I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But just on their free comic book day issue, what they did was the first issue of something they're coming out with called like the best of 2000 AD, and it's supposed to have like some of their best stories ever in there. But the free comic book day version of that has 4 stories in it, and honestly, none of them grabbed me. So maybe that's a difference in taste. Maybe the general public likes something different in there than I do, or maybe it's just not their best of. I don't know. I'm interested in seeing what else they do with that series though, because they have a lot of great little stories. They have a ton of awesome characters. So I feel like the best of 2000 AD has a lot to offer. I just hope they pick some better stories than what they did for the free comic book day version. So I guess that kind of segues into what I wanted to talk about with storytelling this week. And this conversation came up through a lot of channels. I've been a long time advocate for anthologies. I like the way that, at least, within the comic book realm, the way that anthologies are done, like, I really enjoy. I back a lot of anthologies on Kickstarter because it kind of spreads the burden of quality, I guess. Or I guess it spreads the burden of my dollar. I feel like if I'm buying a single book by a single creative team and it's good, then that's great. But if it's not good, I feel like I wasted my money and, they're still getting the attention. So, one thing I really like about anthologies is that this takes a lot of different creators. And so, even if it costs me $10 and I only like 2 stories out of the whole book, were each of those stories worth $5? More than likely. And so to me, that's a win. It also means that I can go online and I can talk about the creators in these anthologies that I did like and kind of boost them without having to feel like I either have to boost an already good creative team or, basically badmouth a bad creative team. I just don't talk about the ones I don't like, and I do talk about the creators I do like, and that gives them attention and brings more people to their doorstep. At the same time, it makes me feel a little better about my purchase because I'm like, hey, I really like what's in here, even if I don't like everything that's in there. So I think anthologies are really great from that perspective. And they're in the publishing world, there's 2 pretty big anthologies, at least, notoriety wise. And it's interesting because they're very popular, very long running, and they're not from the United States. And so that's something that's come up lately, is like how anthologies relate to American culture, because you have Shonen Jump, or weekly Shonen Jump at that. And so basically what this is this is a Japanese manga based anthology that comes out every week, and the creators in here are writing basically like 8-page stories about these characters. And so they're creating a new story of these characters every week. And the readers go in and they vote on what stories they like the most, which ones they like the least. And so as something becomes unpopular, it basically gets like canceled out, and they'll bring in a new creator or a new property or something and try to introduce that. And so a lot of times what happens is, say Akira Toriyama creates Dragon Ball, right? So he's doing these 8-issue or these 8-page stories in Weekly Shonen Jump. It gets really popular. They take all of the 8-page stories and they put them together and sell them in the manga volumes that most people are more familiar with. And so that's why a lot of times when you're reading those, it seems like every couple pages you're like kind of wrapping a story, but then it keeps going. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it's just pulled from 8-page stories. Ultimately, if it gets picked up and turned into an anime, then they have like more long-term creative control, because when they're creating these, they're looking at 8 pages at a time. And so then it gets turned into a manga. And so if that takes off, then you get to the point where they can sit down and say, okay, well, a whole episode would look like this, or a whole season, a whole story would look like this, and they can kind of craft it a little more along those lines. And so I think that's something that's kind of interesting culturally, because like here in America, our expectation is that the best version is, the original version or the written version. They always say the book is better than the movie. And so that's kind of our mentality. But truth be told, a lot of times the anime is like, the tip top perfection of what that property was meant to be. So I think that's already an interesting cultural flip. But just the fact that they're putting out this magazine every single week, and millions of people buy this and vote on these stories, and so that's like a really interesting cultural evolution of storytelling in Japan versus America. On the other side of the pond from there, we also have 2000 AD. And 2000 AD is a British sci-fi anthology book, and the main character, the title character here, would be Judge Dredd. If you're familiar with 2000 AD, it's probably because of Judge Dredd. He's had a couple movies now. He's a pretty popular character. And so every week he has, I think it's, again, an 8-page story. And he's the main story. He's going to be the first story in every 2000 AD. And then they have 3 other stories in there. I think they're all also like 6 to 8 pages, something like that. And they feature different characters. Most recently, I got into this character named the character's name is Nelson Blake, or I'm sorry, Nolan Blake. But the series itself is called Skip Tracer. He's basically a bounty hunter, like in the like this weird future where everybody lives on this giant floating cube. And so I went back and I've read a lot of the old stories, his introductory story, all of that kind of stuff. And I really like this character. He's a great character. I really like the world he lives in. My suggestion: the first story where they introduce him is really good, and then way down the line, there's a storyline called Nimrod, and this one is about this ultimate being named Nimrod taking over everything. It's really cool. It's really interesting stuff. I think it would make that particular storyline would probably make for a great movie. The only problem is they would have to kind of pad it out a little bit, because the way that the story is told, it doesn't really introduce you to the main characters. It only introduces the villain, because that character already exists in other stories. But basically, what you'll have is, say they have a say they have a 24-page story for this character, for Skip Tracer. What they would do is that would be in 3 issues. So for 3 weeks in a row, you get a little 8-page story about Skip Tracer. And so when you put this all together, it tells a pretty solid story. Each one definitely, starts and ends in a way that makes it self-contained, but at the same time, like, you get this overarching narrative. And I think this is really interesting because if you look at American comics, how would something like that work? Well, just think like DC and Marvel, right? They have all these characters, but they can't possibly sell enough copies of each book for all of these characters to have a book or a story. So personally, if it was me, I really like the way they did the DC Universe Rebirth issue. And what they did is they basically reset their universe. But the way they did this is Wally West was trapped in the Speed Force, and so in this like 32 issue comic, what he does is he's running through the Speed Force and he'll drop in for a couple pages to, tell a story with Batman. And then he's out. And he's running through the Speed Force. We get a little bit more of his specific story, and then he drops in and works with the Huntress for a little while. And then he's back out. We get more of his story. He drops in with Barry Allen. We get a Barry Allen Wally West story. I would like to see that kind of format used on a monthly basis for basically an anthology. If you think back in the day, they had all these books that was like, just like team up books. And so once a month, what they're doing is writing a story where Batman and the Flash team up, but there's no real connective material for why they drop in to this world together. They try to loosely explain it, but it's really just like Batman showed up in Star City, so we're gonna put them together or something. I think an ongoing anthology series, even like Ice Cream Man. I haven't actually read this series, but the way I understand it is every issue is kind of its own story, and there's just like one character that is basically the Ice Cream Man, and so that's the connective material there. And I think that's awesome. I think the DC could do that on a monthly basis if, they would take and say, this issue is going to feature the Flash teaming up with Batman and Green Lantern and Wonder Woman, right? And so the book opens with telling a story about the Flash, and then that story somehow leads him into Gotham City with Batman, and they team up and they do a little adventure for a few pages, and then he's out and he's running, he's moving, he goes on and he drops in for 6 pages and teams up with a little short Green Lantern story, and then he's out, he does some more running, we get a little more narrative. He drops in with Wonder Woman, do a couple pages of that, he's out, and then we kind of wrap up his story for the issue. On top of all and there could be themes running through this. So this theme is about revenge, and he helps Batman solve a crime without actually, doing something that he'll regret or, whatever. Like, I feel like there's a million ways they could make anthologies work in the United States, but instead we'd rather complain that there's like 250 characters in the Bat family and Batman gets 2 books and the rest of the family's pretty much left out in the cold. Like, no, the problem is these characters don't need their own book, really. If we could drop them in and out, if we could put them in team ups, if we could put together some sort of anthology that would allow people to use these characters more without them necessarily having to have their own title and all this stuff, I think that would be a way to open up the world to a lot more stories featuring a lot more characters. And I think that's good. Like, I don't have an issue with how many characters DC or Marvel has. The issue is how many books they would need to publish in order to get all these characters out there. And there's like these little bitty characters that people relate to so hardcore because, it matches something they're going through in life. They feel outcast and stuff because of certain ways or certain things. Like, there's so many characters in the background of these books that are relatable that people want to see a story with, but don't really warrant their own book. And so I think that's where an anthology would come in as something like really useful and powerful for DC and Marvel to keep in touch with their fans and keep their fans in touch with their favorite characters. And again, that just like leads into more R&D where you're like, oh wait, here's this like D-list character that we thought nobody cared about, but it has like this really strong following. Maybe we should be paying attention and give that character a book. Or maybe we should use that character in an upcoming movie that we're making, or a TV show, or whatever else, you know? They have all these characters, but the lack of exposure means they don't really know how the general public feels about a lot of those characters. And so I think that would be a great, like, way to bring these characters forward so we do get some kind of involvement with them. It also gives you the R&D factor. The more data you have on, you know, the more you use the character, the more data you get. The more data you get, the better you can use the character. It's a win-win. How are you ever going to know what, you know, lower tier character the audience would react so well to, you know? So I think it's just a huge miss on their part to not be creating titles that allow them to utilize those characters better, you know? I know people love Batman, but the very idea that the Batman line is just Batman means that he's got like 249 characters that are going unused. How does anybody know what those characters are, you know? Like, they need to expand the stories so that there's more characters instead of trying to expand the line, because the market wouldn't support that, you know? It's not cost effective to print 100 copies of a comic, you know, because that's all it'll sell. So they just can't afford to do that. But bringing those characters into other books, I think, would be really interesting. I don't know why the American market doesn't seem to respond so well to anthologies, but Japanese culture, they're getting like great content out of anthologies. 2000 AD in Europe is crushing with awesome characters. I mean, those books are so full of so many characters. Every issue, there's at least one story I like. And that story is probably worth the price of admission. So even if the other three are crap, I mean, I'm still winning. And so I don't understand that mentality of like anthologies aren't great or why they don't sell in the American market, but I would love to see more of that. And I think Marvel and DC are kind of who would be best to spearhead that and be able to change that, because I think that would also benefit their business model the best. So that's my thought on anthologies and how you could better handle them for storytelling and how they could expand out these universes that we love so much but feel a little too insular. So tell me what you guys think. Hit me up on social media. Let me know. Are anthologies a good thing? Are they a bad thing? Why do you like them? Why don't you like them, you know? These are the things I really wonder about a lot of times. Alright, so here we go. We're back to the Cosmic Campfire. Where we left off last week, I had written some dialogue and kind of started forming the Act 1 opening scene here. And so, while I've been thinking and building on that a lot, I'm going to go back all the way from the beginning and kind of read the dialogue, because it helps me a lot to hear this out loud and hear it beyond my own head. It helps me kind of retool the dialogue so it sounds a little more natural. But there is more to this, so don't tune out yet, because if you feel like you hear everything that I'm going through here right now, there's plenty more at the end, and then I'm gonna have some questions about how I could continue to develop this. So, Act 1. Well, that's the last of it for today. Thanks, John. Last collection of the morning and the sun is barely coming up. I should be done before noon. Sounds good, Ron. I might even call it early. You're the only person I've lined up to stop by today. John limped back to the house as Ron secured the vacuum seals on his trailer. Don't want to see none of these grounds escape. See you next month, John. John simply raised his hand over his shoulder as he reached the back porch. He heard the truck pull away, and as he entered the kitchen, he made himself a fresh cup of coffee and some breakfast. Just about the time he sat down and pulled up the latest news feed, the back door swung open. Great. Looks like my morning is shot. What is it today, Gina? Ah, don't be so grumpy. You know you love to see me. That's a stretch. I made fresh coffee if you want some. Gina goes to the fridge and pulls out a bottle and cracks the seal. She pours some in a coffee cup and puts it in the microwave. I'll take some of the pressed stuff if you don't mind. I can't drink that old-fashioned stuff. You mean the way coffee is supposed to be made? You're probably the only person that still drinks that stuff. It's way better pressed out. Takes the edge off. Takes the flavor out of it is what you mean. Tastes recycled. As the news plays in the background, there's a knock at the door. You have visitors? That isn't like you. Probably a salesman. Don't answer it. You can't do that. We don't get many visitors out here. Don't waste his time. His time? He's wasting my time. I don't need whatever. Before John could get the words out, Gina had already bounded to the front door and pulled it open. Hi! Hey! I know you don't need what I'm selling, but that's exactly why I'm here. Sounds good to me. Come on in, have a seat. John didn't move from the table as the man entered the living room. You must be the man of the house. My name is Mac, and I was in the area talking to folks about the opportunity at the Galaxy's Edge. That's a fool's hunt. Ain't nobody here interested in that. She don't even live here, by the way. Part-time. I want to hear more. Gina was fascinated and focused. Great. There is so much opportunity. Everyone is doing what they can to get there. I'm not interested in going anywhere. I've got my property. I've got my work. And generally, people leave me alone. Thanks, but no thanks. Goodbye. Look, I understand you like being out here by yourself, but if I could just have a few moments of your time, I would like to show you some pictures so my bosses know that I tried. And then I'll be off and you never have to hear from me again. Or I could come back tomorrow. I want to see. Today you say? You're already here. No point in coming back tomorrow. Mac sits down at the table and pulls a device out of his bag. He turns on the screen and places it between himself and John. Mister, I'm sorry, how rude of me. I didn't get your name. That's John. I'm his neighbor, Gina. Well, Mr. John, I have an opportunity for you. We want you to go seek out the cosmic campfire. What's a cosmic campfire? It's a myth. No one knows that it even exists. What if I told you that we do know it exists, Mr. John? Max swipes through the air and the image changes on the screen. It shows some sort of spectrographic analysis. That's interesting, but it doesn't show what you are suggesting. Sometimes it isn't about what you see, Mr. John. It is about what you don't see. Mac twists his hand around and the image rotates on the screen. There's a bright orange and yellow section highlighted on the map. There is something in this image that we don't recognize. Theoretically, it has a similar signature to what we would expect to see if we found what we were looking for. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean it is what we think it is, but it is definitely something. I think I've heard enough. I need to finish my work. Goodbye. Don't kick the man out, John. He came all this way and you didn't offer him a bite to eat? Oh, no ma'am, Miss Gina. I'm not hungry. And the presentation is over anyway. I asked Mr. John for a few moments of his time, and I have far exceeded that. Matt grabs the screen from the table, makes a swiping gesture, and a trail of energy jolts from the device and sticks to the refrigerator in the form of photos. I'll leave you a few items of information, just in case you have questions after I leave. And of course my contact info. Reach out if you change your mind. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Mac. No. Thank you for the time, Mr. John and Miss Gina. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Hate to have bothered you. My bosses make me visit everyone on the list, so now I can check you off. Just imagine, there aren't many salesmen in space. No visitors really. It's so empty out there. Mac walks out the door and as John starts cleaning off the table, Mac walks out the door as John starts cleaning off the table and Gina closes it behind him. That was fun. Whatever. It costs a lot of money to head out into the stars. What would I do on my farm anyway? I don't know, but I like to dream. Imagine all the stars and planets you would see. Just emptiness for miles. Time to finish cleaning out the storage bins for tomorrow. The day ain't over until it is ready for tomorrow. John walks out the back door as Gina bounds off the porch headed down the trail through the fields. So, I have one more section to this that, I think is going to build out the big finale for Act 1. and set the adventure in motion. I haven't quite structured it all out, but I have an idea of how that conversation goes. So that's probably going to be where things pick up next week, is finishing Act 1. That'll be episode 6. So in 6 episodes, I've constructed the whole first act of my story. That's pretty exciting. I feel like, things are progressing forward inch by inch, and I'm learning a lot every time I sit down to write. So I hope that that comes through to everybody, and that, everybody else is learning a little bit as we go too. This, I didn't write this structurally to follow the hero's journey, but so far I'm kind of on that path. So I think that's really interesting that it's not something I was trying to do, but it's something that has kind of naturally happened. Because our hero John has just rejected the call to action the first time. So now we got to bring it back around. There's some lines in here that kind of set that up, why he would be interested in leaving, where he would go, what he would do. So I'm excited to fill that out through the end of Act 1, and set up that call to action one more time so that John can go on an adventure into space. I do believe he's going to take Gina with him. This is his partner in crime, whether he realizes it or not. So give me some feedback. You can find me on social media under New Guy, Nuexguy. All the links will be in the show notes. I'm really excited to continue doing this. I want to continue sharing this story as I create it, because like this particular, every time I sit down to work on this, I get really fired up. I get really excited about it, and I can't wait to come on here and talk into this microphone and share it with everybody. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Until next week, I'll keep the fire warm, and I hope to see you soon.